see how we could be in each other's lives.
So let me get this right. Sophie has dumped her husband on national TV, yet still wants him to stick around. She basically wants the same thing that they've been living through for the past few years to continue indefinitely. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? They both need a clean break. And one thing's for sure, Sophie has a lot of growing up to do.
I don't want to go home. I don't want to be here anymore.
Now, before we dive into their breakup, and this one finally seems like it really is the end for these two, let me first please ask a favour. If you're watching this, if you've watched more than a couple of my videos over the last few weeks, do me a favour, show your support, hit that subscribe button please. Costs you nothing, it's a click of a mouse, but it really does help my channel. A few weeks ago, you might remember me saying we were at over 70% of people watching who weren't subscribed. Now, we've managed to bring that down. We're now at 62.2% who watch but aren't subscribed, but I still think we can do better. Come on guys, hit that subscribe button and let's dive in. So the time has now come for the couples to decide once and for all whether or not they'll recommit to one another. Now this of course isn't Rob and Sophie's first rodeo. I swear it feels like these two have broken up and then gotten back together again more times than I can count. But, as they've both told us, this is, well and truly, their last resort. If this doesn't work, then that's it, it's over.
I do love Sophie, and my heart wants us to work it out, but I guess I'm worried that it's like too little too late.
Rob's frustration stems from the fact that it's taken The Last Resort, another TV show, for Sophie to actually give him the time of day in order to work on their marriage. But the truth is, there's just too much to work on. It would take 15 seasons for these guys to even scratch the surface of all of their problems. And I think deep down Rob must know that he's fighting a losing battle. Don't get me wrong, he's definitely not perfect, he's definitely f***ed up in the past, but he is making an effort, right? He is trying to fix their marriage. Only whatever he tries, right, it seems to just be completely lost on Sophie. It's never enough for her.
I don't know yet what I'm going to do. We have happy moments, but he's unable to treat me how I think I deserve to be treated.
Rob definitely could have been better, right? He's not the model husband and there's no disputing that. But putting him to one side for a second, taking him out of the equation, it's so crystal clear, right, that Sophie doesn't know what she wants. Like, maybe it's her age, maybe it's naivety, right? But she seems to have this fantasy of a Prince Charming, someone who will ride in, sweep her off her feet and save her from the difficult life that she's led. But that guy doesn't exist. This isn't a fairy tale. Now, she has overlooked Rob's flaws in the past. She has said that she forgives him, but it's never really felt like she's forgiven him, if you get what I mean. It's always felt like the issues remain and they've never been able to move on. So will this time be exactly the same all over again? Well, when the time eventually comes for them to decide whether or not they want to recommit, Rob begins by acknowledging just how different everything feels this time around.
Like when I see Sophie, she looks beautiful, but on our wedding day, I looked at her and I saw my future.
Rob saying that he saw a future with her then, but not now, feels like quite a big admission. Keep that in mind. Keep in mind the fact that he himself isn't sure that there's a future here, because it becomes important later on. But it's Sophie who goes first, right? And her speech is a little different. Instead of a message to Rob, Sophie has written a letter to her younger self. And hearing this, Rob's eyes immediately soften. He knows that this is a big deal. He knows just how traumatic Sophie's childhood has been and how she's still battling with those issues. They're still affecting their marriage to this day. I get the feeling he thinks this is a good thing for his marriage. I think he's expecting Sophie to address the issues and overcome them with this letter. But, oh boy, is he mistaken.
Dear younger Sophie, remember to stand up for yourself if people are mean to you. And remember you're perfect the way you are. Don't ever lose your light.
Now, as Sophie's speech begins, there's something sweet, but also something really juvenile about it. Like, that almost feels very in keeping with her character, doesn't it? Sophie has always been very childish, and whether or not that stems from her childhood trauma, and I'm sure there's a discussion to be had there, the truth is, that side of her personality has had a negative effect on their relationship. Now, Sophie's letter goes on to remind herself that she's strong and she should never change for anyone. And as she says this, as she's reading out this message for herself, she begins to cry at her own words.
And grown Sophie has grown into a kind, loving person who deserves love and happiness.
Rob's face has fallen. Sophie's tears, her demeanour and her message definitely have his alarm bells ringing. I mean, this definitely doesn't sound like the start of a speech that's going to end up with them leaving arm in arm. In fact, it actually takes a very long time for Sophie to even bring up Rob in her speech, and when she does, she doesn't even reference him by name.
Even though who you marry is not your dream man, you was happy with him.
And that's that, I think. Like, that was Sophie's way of ending her marriage. Like, I think in her mind, Sophie thinks that she's delivering this in a nice way. She thinks that this is a soft blow, but it's not. It's actually quite harsh. Like, if she's gonna end it, actually say the words. Don't do it by giving the guy a backhanded insult. He's not my dream man, she says. But again, going back to what I was saying before, who is her dream man? Like, the fantasy that she seems to be after doesn't exist. A marriage does require compromise, and Sophie is pretty stubborn. Like, she wants things all her own way, doesn't she? Now, she actually goes on to say, I'll always love Rob, I'll always care for him, but she doesn't need to say much more, does she? The message, what she's trying to say, has definitely been received.
Well, I think that's pretty much it then, huh?
I would like to still hear what you heard.
No.
Rob's refusal to read out his speech definitely implies that it was the opposite of Sophie's. He's not prepared to give her the honour of hearing it. When he says no, it's very intense. It's as if he's not just saying no to Sophie hearing his speech, he's saying no to his love for her, no to her having access to his feelings anymore. But while Rob was able to pick up Sophie's cryptic message, Sophie clearly isn't able to pick up Rob's, because rather than backing off, she then asks him for a hug and begins to cry in his arms.
You're just not good together. I still want you in my life.
I don't see how we could be in each other's lives.
Sophie's right, they're not good for one another, and this breakup has been a long time coming. Now, her request for him to still be a part of her life, on the one hand, might just be something that she's saying, right? It might be the kind of thing that a lot of couples say when they break up, almost in a bid to try and soften the blow. But on the other hand, we know these two's history, don't we? We know that inability to draw a line under things once they've broken up, the fact that they remain in each other's lives, is what's contributed to this purgatory that they're both living. Like, I think Rob's right. I wholeheartedly agree with him that he shouldn't be in her life. And I think it says a lot that even the way that Rob is clinging to Sophie isn't the same as the way she's clinging to him. This really does seem like the end for him. Or at least Florian certainly hopes so.
This is mother bull. I promise you, that English muffin never going to grow up. He's going to stay like that, you know? And I feel pretty bad for Rob, to be honest.
Florian's right. Sophie has got a lot of growing up to do. Now, she is young. She does have time on her side. She did get married at a young age. But the truth is, if she wants any relationship to work, right, she is going to need to work on herself. She can't continue acting like this little kid. Now, as for Rob, well, he takes this all quite badly. No sooner than Sophie's speech is finished, than Rob gets up and walks out of the ceremony.
I'm not the man of her dreams. So that's what you're gonna leave me for somebody that you don't know.
He's having a really difficult time digesting what she meant by the whole man of my dreams comment. What, is she throwing away what we have for a figment of her imagination, he asks. Like, that comment has really cut deep. Rob feels like he's been strung along. He feels like she should never have married him in the first place if that's how she felt. Surely she must have known that. She must have felt like that for a long time. So why has it taken her so long to do something about it? I think it's that realization, the realization that he's been dragged along all the while, her knowing that it's not gonna work. That's what's really broken him.
I did all this just to end up alone.
Now, while Rob processes the breakdown of his marriage alone in his room, Sophie sticks around at the ceremony for a while longer, or at least up until Julia and Brandon's love-filled recommitment. Seeing their outpouring of love for each other tips her over the edge. There and then, she gets up and leaves too. Now, away from everyone else, the producers ask Sophie, what do you think Rob was going to say in his speech? Do you think he wanted to recommit, they ask.
It would make me feel better if he was also not going to recommit, and I could at least feel better that he's not hurt.
Sophie's feeling guilty, isn't she? She's hoping that Rob was going to say the same so that she doesn't have to feel as bad. But it couldn't have been more obvious that Rob was going to recommit to her. Now, as we leave Sophie crying under a blanket, we rejoin Rob in his room, and the producers ask him if he'd be prepared to read part of his speech. He agrees. He agrees to read the ending of the speech, but the first 2 pages, he says, are now far too private for me to ever reveal.
I've been reminded of Sophie's love for me these past few days, and my heart has always wanted it to be her. So that being said, I will recommit to Sophie and to us one last time.
It's funny, isn't it? Even that is like a symbolic representation of how differently these two have viewed their time at the last resort. Sophie has seen this time as proving that they have no hope, proving that they can't move forward, whereas Rob has seen exactly the same time as proving that they're making progress, proving that he wants to be in this marriage, proving that he does love Sophie. So that raises the question, how can they be interpreting exactly the same thing in polar opposite ways? Has Sophie been faking it, or is Rob just delusional? Well, I don't think we'll ever fully know. But Rob tells us, if she had recommitted today, I had very big plans for our future together.
If Sophie will move to Los Angeles with me, we will again have our time together, and it is worth it to me to see if we can continue to grow together.
Now, this is a little confusing, isn't it? Because earlier, Rob told us before the ceremony began that he no longer felt like he felt on his wedding day. He no longer looked at Sophie and saw his future. So why then was he planning to move back to LA? Like, if he doesn't see a future with her, what sense would that make? Like, I think Rob also needs to be honest with himself. This really shouldn't come as that big a surprise to him. He should have known for a long time now that this marriage is doomed. If anything, I think Sophie has done him a massive favour. Don't get me wrong, it's sad, it's never nice when a marriage breaks down. But in their case, this really is for the best, despite how painful it might feel.
I don't want to go home. I don't want to be here anymore.
Sophie might be childish, she might be immature, and yes, she certainly has a lot of growing up to do. But isn't it interesting that by her taking the first steps to end this nightmarish marriage, she may have just taken the most grown-up decision we've ever seen her make?